We've had some debates and discussions in the past, to the two of us, on the topic of the individual and the community. And this is only partly does this relate to our conversation today, but I want to make the remark that one of my frustrations with public debating is that the different sides of the debate are sort of forced into a particular position that you have to defend. And so in these discussions we've had, I had to, from a more conservative perspective, had to defend the community, and you, the individual, from a more classical liberal perspective. But is it safe to say that even though we might find that you would place a bigger emphasis on the individual and I would place a bigger emphasis on the community, that the both of us think about freedom as something that cannot fall exclusively within the realm of the individual or the community, that you need to find a balance between the two?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's 100% correct. And I think that has been correct for, call it classical conservatism and classical liberalism since the start, really. If you read classical liberals like Hayek and so on, they would be very upfront about that reality, to say that if you attack community, you also really attack individual liberties. Because as I think communitarians have rightly noted more than liberals in recent years, is that the individual is standing alone before the state. It's not possible. Yeah, it's not possible as a lone individual to protect even your own liberty. And this is something that in practice has been realized in every free society in the world, where it's not just an individual protecting their liberty, but it's always civil society groups, communities standing up for the freedom of the people within their communities. And we look at the United States, for instance, which is hailed around the world as this kind of beacon of individual liberty that may be becoming less true as each year goes by. But even there you find that the huge degree of decentralization allows communities like the Amish to live kind of relatively exclusively in their areas and do what they want to do. You have Native American reserves, and you also have, on a more formal level, a lot of decentralization to municipalities and so on, that just gives communities a lot more power to kind of self-determine within the kind of framework of a dispensation that also respects the rights of the individual. So these two things kind of hang together. And I think if you look at the history of political contestation, sure, classical liberals and classical conservatives have had their fights, and I'm sure you and I obviously also disagree about quite a few policy areas. But if you look at history, it's when there's alliances, it's usually the classical conservatives and the classical liberals allying against the classical radicals, maybe for lack of a better word. Because I think what we take as important is to say that there is a limit to what you can interfere with. Now, for us, we would say there's limits into what you can interfere with the individual. You would say there's limits to what you can interfere with what the community is doing. But the radicals, there's no limit. Whatever the state wants to do, the state must be allowed to do. And you've correctly often traced that back to the French Revolution. And I think that's probably where that thinking came about. And just to link it to South Africa, I think that one of the ironies is that you have these radicals speaking about these ideas as if it's from an authentically African Ubuntu perspective, but you just see Jean-Jacques Rousseau and so on in all of
Marx.
their thought. And Marx, which comes from that same tradition. So it's again, this is nothing new happening in South Africa. It's again the classical liberals and the classical conservatives allying together, even though they have disagreements, against the radicals, the classical Western radicals. Ubuntu and Africanism, actually, it's a pretense. This is just an age-old debate playing itself out again in South Africa.